Hey, what's up guys? I am Brian and this is Tech Therapy. Today's video will be on the LG C2, one of the best panels released earlier this year. It is a 55-inch OLED. It will be going against last year's LG C1, which is behind me and which is also my personal display. I like doing these comparisons around this time of year simply because many of you are looking to buy. It is the end of September with October, November, and Black Friday just around the corner. Many of you are really looking to make that purchase now. You're going through our older videos from the beginning of the year. I like showing these videos, or at least showing these comparisons now as the panels are fully updated and pretty much are in their final form. I know it's an absurd comparison. It's 83 inches versus 55 inch. The video before this was the 77-inch A80J versus the C2. Upcoming, I have a 65-inch A90J versus a 65-inch C2, so those are more comparable. However, the reason I like doing this comparison is simply that you'll also be able to, other than me just having these sizes, you'll be able to see the size difference, as many of you are looking at smaller panels of this year and then thinking to yourself, well, maybe I'll get a larger panel from last year. It's the best way to weigh your options. Value, quality versus size, and good quality from perhaps last year. Special thank you to Mr. Robert and Wendy Zahn of Value Electronics for supplying the LG C2 for extended review. I have had it since launch. Please consider making your next AV purchase through them. Check the description below for all of their information. Let them know that Brian from Brian's Tech Therapy sent you. They will take amazing care of you. I've enjoyed the LG C2 immensely. Let's see how it compares to last year's LG C1. All right, guys, here we are behind the camera looking at the LG C1 at 83 inches versus the LG C2 at 55 inches. I mentioned earlier, I know this is an absurd comparison. Many people get hung up on the differences in size. As I mentioned, though, these are the panels that I have. So these are the ones that I'm showing you, but I also like to show you the differences between an 83-inch and a 55-inch, as many people that don't own larger panels have no idea the differences between sizes, and even in store, you rarely see them right next to each other in this fashion. The LG C2 was my early favorite for panel of the year. It is an upgrade over the C1, though it is incremental, still an upgrade on an already amazing panel. Here we are looking at a Hisense demo. This is actually SDR. We'll keep the panels in a cinema preset, nothing too vibrant until we get to the vibrant demos where we'll switch to standard. Again, C2 earlier this year, it's the first panel that I brought home from Value Electronics. I immediately loved it. Something about the processing just seemed to be a bit cleaner, a bit sharper, slightly more detailed. Now I know for us talking about panels year in and year out, slightly better or incremental upgrades are not something everybody wants to hear. But what we want to hear more than anything is major jumps. Incremental upgrades are actually great as long as we don't go backwards. That is the key, as many of you don't upgrade from year to year. The reason I like them being incremental is also it gives you the opportunity to look back a year and perhaps have a better value. The C1 was an excellent panel and something that a lot of you guys would consider as the prices keep falling. The C2 was also a good value. The Samsung S95B QD OLED really drove down the prices of all OLEDs from all manufacturers. Now, largely, they're pretty much the same as far as the C1 and the C2. This is, again, an 83-inch C1. Neither one have the pink tint that is widely, mentioned on many videos. They're both relatively clean. However, banding vertical banding is a problem on larger panels. My panel at 83, while pretty clean, still exhibits that in certain content. Just something to be mindful for if you go up to a larger size. For me, 55 inches and 65 inches is still the sweet spot among many of you, where at that size, the screen uniformity issues are not as obvious. Now, I love comparing panels from the same manufacturer, as it's not hard to sync them up in terms of their settings. Mainly the differences in settings, there are a few different motion settings on the C2, or actually less settings on the C2, and other color settings as far as how you can pick your color space. But it wasn't hard to make them look very close. Now, much like the C2 versus the A80J, I do feel the C2 has a slightly brighter look to it, even though it's a smaller panel. Now, for the smaller panel to be cleaner makes complete sense due to pixel density. However, for it to appear slightly brighter versus a panel at 83 inches is quite the feat. I do feel it is a bit brighter. And again, really do appreciate the slight upgrades. Now, the slight upgrades, people will say, well, come on, man, we want more than that. I understand that. However, many of you aren't buying a C1 and then a C2 and then a C3, so on and so forth. You're buying your panels for the first time. I would say upgrading from a C8, C9, CX, C1, C2. Some of you feel the CX was a bit of a more dim year and that they came back to life with the C2 and maybe even the C1. Hard to tell with the CX, as it was a panel that struggled a lot in the beginning, a lot of updates to get it where it needed to be, but I do feel at the end of the CX, it was where it should be. These are gorgeous demos. Again, I wish I could show you more movie content. Copyright is murder on YouTube. Now, the question for me is, would I have upgraded this 83-inch C1 to an 83-inch C2? I mean, obviously, if I was just swapping them out, I would do that, but I wouldn't consciously do that in terms of even just reboxing it up and selling it would not be worth the difference of a C2. Now, the G2 being even brighter, for me, why am I apprehensive? Well, for me, the G2 at 83 inches, it's a little bit hard, again, due to some screen uniformity issues. Though I still recommend it, I don't want to trade one for the other unless it's a drastic change. As much as I love OLEDs, I may venture into LEDs next year. But with every technology is its plus and minuses. You can have excellent blacks on OLEDs, but exhibit some of the banding that we spoke about, or you can have brighter highlights or a brighter overall image, but then have blooming around darker areas. So there really isn't any perfect technology. Now, QD OLED I consider to be the great disruptor this year. Once the S95B came out, everyone focused on that, and with good reason. It was absolutely amazing. More importantly, the S95, whether it was the saturation or the color, was a screen uniformity just seemed to be really on point. So that panel had been brought back to earth a little bit, so bringing these back in, how they look very similar on certain content, especially under 1,000 nits. But we can both agree, or all agree, that they are very bright, they are very beautiful. And the C2 and the G2, in my opinion, caught up to the slight edge that the A90J had. Now, that video is coming up in a few days, so we'll also show you that. Because many in the industry consider the A90J to be a clear step up, when in reality, even having them all side by side, though it had the heatsink and was a step up, it still in a way is incremental. So all the speak that you have in our videos, all the commentary and forums, in reality, they are still very close. Now, the biggest reason we recommend upgrading from a panel that you perhaps had last year was a larger size and or feature set. Now we move into the end of this video. I want to show you the game optimizer on both panels. The C1 had introduced that a little bit of in the CX. Samsung also introduced it, I believe, first. What I like about the game optimizer is giving you more presets within game, letting you affect the black stabilizer, white stabilizer. You can deepen the image or lighten the image per parts of the screen, whether you're playing a first-person shooter, but also giving you these 5 or 6 presets where a lot of other manufacturers have just game mode and HDR game mode. What the C2 does improve upon this is offer more options within the actual game optimizer menu. You'll see here in the video that when I want to go into all settings, it then puts me back into the C1's actual picture settings, which is a little bit long, a little bit arduous to get out of that, where all of that is handled within the game optimizer on the C2. Making it to where you don't have to disable the game optimizer, you don't have to step out of the game optimizer. All the settings you're looking for, color, dynamic contrast, HDR tone mapping, they're all right here, making it easier for you to flip in between each one and see how they affect the screen. Now, Game Optimizer is not something I thought was important, but between Samsung and LG, being a hardcore gamer, it's something I simply can't do without. As much as I love Sony, I do feel that it lacking this Game Optimizer for FPS, letting you know if VRR is engaged, G-Sync, FreeSync. Without that now, you kind of don't know where you are. Especially with Sony, it makes you go all the way out into the enhanced input menus to see if things are engaged. It's all here for you, whether it's PC or console, a great addition to their lineup, and also better here with the C2. And for me, with the C2, you can accomplish much of this with the C1, but the streamlining part of the C2, to me, is a big difference. Not worth upgrading for, but definitely worth mentioning and definitely an improvement. Now, again, if you watch my review of the C2 when it first came out, it was one of my favorite panels right off the bat. The QD OLED, again, quieted a lot of that down, but now looking at how everything has settled out, the C2 is very easy to recommend. Now, would I go for the C2 over the C1? At the same size, the C2 is, in my opinion, better. It all comes into your budget, and if you can get a C1, they will continue to support it. If you can get a C1 at a great value and perhaps a larger size, the way I look at it is if you can get a C1 at 65 or 77 for the cost of a 55-inch C2, then I would go with the C1. However, at the same size, I take the C1 every time. The G2 is a step up in the other direction as far as it is a larger upgrade, but you do have a much more expensive panel. I do not like the design of the G2. I love the mount of the G2, but I don't like the style. I don't like that it doesn't look like an OLED. To me, it looks like a QLED. It is brighter. The processing is virtually the same. But if you want that brighter image to get to that level, you will have to go with the G2. To me, the C2, much like the other C series, is the best value and the one many of you will choose because it does fall into their mid-range with very high-end picture quality. Moving to our last demo, special thank you to Jennifer Gala and her other channel, the HCR Super Channel, for all of her exquisite content. Check the description below for Jennifer's amazing work. Please like, subscribe, and share to Jennifer. But what do you guys think? Is this part of the year? I know a lot of you are pulling your finances together and making that purchase. You have all your reviews together. You're pulling all your resources together. Where are you? What are you thinking? Are you thinking OLED? Are you thinking mini LED? Has the late resurgence from Hisense and TCL, from those brands, has that shook you a bit? Do you want to go for a flagship panel from those brand names or come in here and grab a C2? Which again, flagship picture quality at the mid-range. For me, the C2 should be at the top of your list. The gaming features, the different versatility of its settings and its value definitely puts it on top of the others in many ways. Highly recommended, and again, a good value. But as far as it versus my own C1, tad brighter, a tad cleaner, and while an incremental upgrade, an upgrade nonetheless. All right, guys, I am Brian at Brian's Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the comments. Love you guys.